Today, I survived 200 days in Better Minecraft. This video is a sequel to my 100 days in Better Minecraft, so if you haven't seen that, go watch that. But anyways, it's day 101, and I loaded in on top of my roof. The first thing I found myself doing was looking at the recipes for Eternium, but before I wanted to do any of that, I wanted to fight the dragon again. The main reason for this was because I found out that dragon armor is much better than netherite, and I used all my dragon skills on my tools and weapons. And to respawn the dragon, I need end crystals. And the first item in the end crystal recipe is an Eye of Ender, so I headed into the end. Once I was in the end, I went ahead and killed a few endermen for their ender pearls. Shortly after, I found myself back in my base where I would realize I didn't have enough blaze powder to turn my ender pearls into Eyes of Ender. So I headed to my nearby nether fortress. Once I got to my nether fortress, I had to fight off a few wither skeletons before I could get to the blazes. Thankfully, the wither skeletons were no match for me though. And now it's time to kill my blazes. Unsurprisingly though, it only took one blaze because I had looting 3 and I headed back to my base right after. At my base I crafted 4 ender pearls into Eyes of Ender. And the next thing I would need for end crystals is glass, and I don't have any sand or glass laying around at my base, so I went down to the nearby river to collect some. At the river I collected up a bunch of sand and then headed back to my base after. At my base I started smelting up the sand so I could turn it into glass by the morning. After a little bit of waiting, I would have enough glass to craft 3 end crystals, so I just had to wait for a little bit more. Once I had enough glass, I crafted my final end crystal and decided to head into the end on the night of day 101. Alright. In the end, I immediately ran over to the dragon altar. At the dragon altar, I began to place the end crystals on the bedrock and waited for the dragon to respawn. Once the dragon had respawned, I went ahead and destroyed all the crystals on the towers. Now, if you're watching modded Minecraft, I imagine you know how the dragon fight goes, so I'll just show you the highlights. Like when I said this and then proceeded to miss 20 shots in a row. After about 5 more minutes, I ended up finally finishing him off. And he dropped 4 scales for me. And then I hit the egg to move it and went and grabbed it. Now that I have everything I needed, I 360 back to my base on day 102. Once I was back at my base, I realized I was really low on food and didn't have anything to replace it, so I headed over to the oak village with a diamond hoe to break a bunch of hay bales. Once I got all the hay bales I could find, I headed back to my base and crafted a bunch of it into wheat, which I would craft into bread. Now that I have my food situation sorted out, I decided to work on enchanting a new diamond sword because I found out that the netherite diamond sword is actually better than the dragon sword. But when I saw I had no lapis, I ran away crying. I spent the rest of the day stimming in the overworld and then stimming in the nether before I came back home and went to sleep. On day 103, I teleported to the building I called in the last episode the End Hotel. But then I realized I didn't have a bridge or any way to get to the main island, so I had to start destroying the hotel to build a bridge. Once I got to the main island, I went to the volcanic area and found that it was the home to a lot of ender warthogs, which were extremely strong and knock you back very far. Nevertheless, I continued my way over to this floating end ship to loot it. The most notable thing I got from the ship was the 4 diamonds from the first chest, and then the rest was alright. Once I left the volcanic biome, I saw a giant glow shroom tree, so I decided to go over to it and try to get on top of it, see if there was anything. And while I did have ender pearls, the gap was far too long to make with them alone, so I grabbed some wood and bridged halfway over. And once I was pretty sure my bridge was far enough, I threw an ender pearl and got very close to the edge when it teleported me. But regardless, I'm here now, and it didn't take long before I started to build up the tree. However, the unfortunate truth was that there was nothing on top of the tree besides a bunch of endermen. But from the top, I could see a crashed ship, so I decided to pearl over to it. Once I opened the first chest, I learned that this ship was once ruled by a bunch of nerds, which led me to steal everything. And I got another end city map, but after a little bit of investigating, it was the same one I had prior. I also learned that right next to my end city, there was an eternal portal, which I needed to light for a goal, but I didn't have the supplies at the moment. Can't make the portal. After a little bit more of exploring, I ran into a ruined portal, but the chest was as useless as the ones on the overworld. And then I saw this giant floating thing in the middle of the void, so I decided to bridge over to it because I was curious. Once I was there, I saw the structure was actually just a huge end portal frame, and the smaller thing on top of it was also an end portal frame that I'm assuming I would do to trigger a boss. Since I couldn't spawn the boss, I just used an ender pearl to get back to the main islands. And then, while still exploring, I found a full eternal portal, so that was pretty cool, but I still didn't have the stuff to light it. And then, not even like a minute later, I did actually find another floating end ship, so I looted that. The ship's loot was pretty decent, and it did have a good bit of diamonds and a good bit of gold. And then I headed out and started exploring again. Literally right after, I found a purple mine shaft and decided to go explore it. In the mine shaft, I found some amber ore, which I wasn't even sure what amber did at the times, but I mined it anyway. And then afterwards, I found out it was mostly used for the infusion pedestal. And right once I left, I found a floating end ship. This one actually was pretty good, and it had a bunch of diamonds in it. After bridging most of the way over to another island, I found another ship, and the ship was pretty ass. The next ship I found, I got a bunch of gold. Another one was alright. And then I found another one of those things I called the End Hotel, and it had a chest. And then I found another ship, and then I found another cool building that had a ship inside of it. I'm not sure what the building was, but it was pretty cool and had a couple diamonds. And then I saw a few more ships and I looted them before heading back. And then once I was back in my base, I went to sleep on day 106. I spent the first half of day 107 just sorting out all of my loot and emptying my shulker boxes, and then I made one of every netherite ingot. And then I combined a bunch of the diamond swords I found from the end. Afterward, I headed to the birch village, grabbed a mending book, and then headed back. Once I got back, I grabbed a bunch of diamonds and crafted a ton of smithing templates because I would need them to turn my diamond sword into a netherite diamond. Once I went inside my base, I turned my sword netherite and then netherite iron, and so on, until it was netherite diamond. Inside the netherite diamond sword, I grabbed all my armor and the dragon scales and made all of my armor into dragon armor. Once I had all that done, I grabbed my netherite emerald pickaxe and upgraded it into netherite diamond. First thing I did on day 108 after looking at my new dragon armor was head into the nether. I didn't do much in the nether, but I did find this weird altar, so that was kind of cool. But that was literally it before I headed home and went to sleep. On day 109, I decided to head into the end because I wanted more netherite and I wanted to see if killing warthogs was worth it. I also learned that eating warthog meat gives you speed, so that's pretty cool. Once I actually got scared of being swarmed by a bunch of them, I decided to build up and place a waystone where I would head back to my base. On day 110, since I accidentally made my silk touch pickaxe a dragon instead of a netherite diamond, I decided to begin enchanting another one, but since I already had a really good one, I just wanted to put mending on it. And so I quickly headed over to the birch village where I bought a mending book and then headed back to my base. I'm not exactly sure why, but I decided I wanted to fight the dragon again. So I headed into the end and got some ender pearls. Once I had all the pearls I needed, I found myself in the nether trying to get more blaze powder. After I made the ender eyes, I headed back to my base and crafted up the 3 end crystals I needed, so it's to the end now. And after I spawned the dragon, blah 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 blah. And then the dragon was dead. Afterward, I headed into the far end so I could kill more warthogs for more netherite, which took up the rest of day 110 and day 111. But on day 112, I found myself at the end hotel because I wanted to put a waystone at the end city I'd found. And after a long trip with nothing notable, I put the waystone next to the eternal portal and quickly headed back to my base. I read the end guide for dummies and I learned how to actually light the eternal portal, but I wasn't going to do that at this time. So I went to sleep. Day 113, I started to run out of food, which caused me to grab a bunch of potatoes and go to plant them. After I planted a bunch of them, since I'm super impatient, I went ahead and started bone mealing them and collecting them with fortune. Once I used both the stacks of my bone meal, I went ahead and went to the smokers in my base and started cooking the potatoes. Next thing you know, I grabbed an eye of ender and a waystone because I wanted to go back to the huge end portal frame and fight a boss. Once I got there, I placed down the waystone and went ahead and put the eye of ender into the frame. And then once the boss finally spawned, I went to attack it, and it didn't really do anything. After ignoring a bunch of its attacks, I just kept hitting it, and it eventually did actually die. Once it died, it turned into an obsidian pillar, and I built up to the top and got the loot from it. After I killed it, I collected the quest, and it gave me a table of levitation, staff of suppression, and a few levels. And then I headed back to my base. Once I got back on the morning of day 14, I placed down the table of elevation and messed around for a second. Afterward, I found a quest to kill the eye and saw how to build the shrine, and I had everything except for the end rods I would need. So I headed into the end. I literally spent the entire rest of the day just trying to climb towers and collect the end rods off the top of them, not even realizing it was a lot easier and quicker to just craft them myself. And that's why on day 115, I found myself in the nether trying to find blazes because blaze rods were in the recipe for end rods. After I killed my first 2 blazes, I still only had 1 blaze rod, so I continued looking around for more because I thought it would take quite a few more. Eventually, I did have all 4, and I no longer needed to be in the nether, but in the end. Once I got to the end, I destroyed a chorus plant because I needed to smelt one to make end rods. And then, using a crafting table I just made, I made an endstone furnace, placed it down, and cooked up some chorus fruit, and then I realized that it only took 1 blaze rod to make 4 more end rods. Oh my gosh, it only takes 1 to make 4. Jesus. Next thing you know, I had everything, so I found myself on the main island building the platform to spawn the eye. After the platform was done, I placed the egg on it, and nothing. Afterwards, I did find out, though, that I just needed to wait a long time for it to actually spawn. But once it did spawn, I started shooting it a bunch, and it didn't really attack at all. Once it got to half health, it spawned a couple more of itself. And about 2/3 of the way through the fight, I completely ran out of arrows. Oh my god, I'm out of arrows. And back in my base on the morning of day 116, I checked for arrows, but I didn't have any, so I grabbed all my flint and a couple sticks and went out to go find feathers. This would take a lot longer than I thought. So I headed to the birch village to find some ducks and chickens. I found none. And then I headed to the bone village, and before it turned night, I actually found a single sparrow and got 1 feather. Day 117, I continued exploring and finally at least found a couple ducks. And then once I headed into the forest nearby, I started to find a decent bit, but none of them were dropping feathers. And then I headed back to the bone village and went in the other direction to the other forest. And I found some ducks. Let's go. And then eventually I kept looking but didn't find too many more, and I just went to sleep in the woods. Day 118 and I was still looking. And then back at my base, I finally crafted a bunch more arrows. And the one thing I was missing to craft some more was flint, so I went down to the river with my fortune pickaxe to collect some flint. And then back at my base, I finished up crafting the rest of my arrows, and then just sat there doing nothing for the rest of the day pretty much. Now that I had the arrows I needed, I headed back into the inn to fight the eye. So I shot the eye, and shot the eye, until it finally died. After it died, it turned into a platform, and I got the prime eye. And then I went back to my base and grabbed a bunch of blocks, so I could build up to the platform to see what it was. Once I got to the platform, I clicked it, and it actually teleported me. And then I couldn't teleport back, so I had no other choice to fight the void shadow. But I literally ran around for like 30 or 45 minutes because I couldn't find out how to damage it until I eventually looked up a YouTube video and got somewhat of an idea. I found out that the balls the void minions shoot you can actually be redirected, and you're supposed to redirect them at these large crystals. After another long 20-minute period, I finally killed the void shadow. Then after killing all the void minions, I opened the chest that he dropped. And it gave me 3 enchanted books that were a higher level than you can actually get in vanilla Minecraft, so that was pretty cool. But it also gave me a source stone, and I tested it out once I got to the main world, and it was pretty bad. But before I ended up getting home, I actually went to sleep. And I started day 20 off by running back to my base. And once I got back to my base, I noticed I had an effect called Fame that lasted 30 minutes, and I wanted to see if it was the same as Hero of the Village, so I went over to the Birch Village. Should I go to the village and see what they think? And at the village, I was right. Everything was quite a bit cheaper, and it was pretty much the same as Hero of the Village, if not better. But then I headed back into the Void Dimension because I was wondering why my quest hadn't completed for defeating the Void Shadow. I couldn't figure it out though, so I just went back to the overworld and went to sleep as it turned night. I started day 121 by heading back to my base. Before I got back to my base, I found a little lapis and collected that. And then once I got back to my base, I put the Aqua Affinity 2 book on my helmet. And then I disenchanted one of my diamond axes because I wanted to get a new one. But before I could do that, I went to sleep. First thing I did on day 122 was enchant my axe. I got efficiency 4 and breaking 3 and fortune 3, so it was pretty good. And then I went back to my base, and while I was trying to hatch this dragon egg, the one to my left hatched. What? But the only thing is I didn't know how to raise it or how long it would take. Eventually I did notice though that my dragon was stuck in the wall, so I mined out some of the wall and pushed it through. I really didn't know how to ride the dragon, but I just kept sitting there with the saddle, not realizing it was a baby. Eventually though, I headed over to the bone village to get some raw meat because I hoped that would speed up the growing process of the dragon. And that was pretty much the rest of the day. On day 123, I crafted a bunch of the ores I had into blocks. And then a little bit later in the day, I realized my dragon was fully grown, so I put the saddle on and took him out. What? And then I started out to go find the Night Lich Tower. But on my way, I dismounted on top of a canyon. Wow. But once I got back up to it, I continued on and eventually went to sleep inside of a spruce village I found. Once I woke up on day 124, I continued on. And then I eventually did find the tower, so I put my dragon on top. Afterwards, I went down the tower and put all the soul stars into the altars and waited for the Night Lich to spawn. I spent a while looking for him, but I couldn't find him until eventually he flew at me. I spent a while shooting at him, and once again, it was just another easy boss fight. That's all these seem to be at this point. And then he spawned a bunch of phantoms inside, which was actually kind of annoying. But I kept shooting, and 20 shots later, I finally killed him. And then I went down and spent 20 minutes looking for the loot he dropped because it doesn't give it to you. But eventually I did start to find all the loot. But I found his balls drop on top of a tree, so that was funny. And then I eventually started to fly away on the morning of day 125. Day 125 through 127, they're corrupt. Day 128, I grabbed my Cincinnati diamond sword because it had soul stealing on it. And I headed down into the cave because I wanted to get skeleton souls so I can make a skeleton spawner. And after a little while, I did get one, so I headed out. At my base, I took the spawner fragments and turned them into a spawner. But I didn't want to quite make the spawner yet, so I turned my new silk touch pickaxe into netherite. And then I headed out to go find a cave to go mining because I was out of diamonds. On day 129, I found my first actual cave. And then I found out this was connected to the traditional village, but I continued down. On my way down, I did find a room with a zombie villager spawner, so that was kind of cool. Never seen one of those. But before going much further down, I decided to explore the mine shaft a little more. While I was exploring, I actually found your mom in the cave, so that was kind of cool. And just after that, I found my first diamonds in the cave, so I built up to them and mined them. A little bit after that, I actually ended up finding the deep dark, and it would be a mistake going in here. 2. I did not know what I was getting myself into. 3. Oh god. Wait. Whoa, we can climb? What the? Bro knows. He knows! Big mistake. How does he know? How does he know? How? Since I was so scared, I decided to dig a hole in the wall. Alright, and eventually I was far enough away to where he couldn't hit me and I could just shoot it. Oh, let's go. It just kind of... So once I killed the warden, I decided to head back in the cave, but I saw 2 more and decided to run away again. Why are there 2? So I just spawned up to the surface, but once I got up, it was nighttime, and I went to sleep. Once I woke up on day 30, it was raining, and I headed back to my base to deposit a bunch of the loot I had gotten. But I decided I hadn't gotten enough while mining, so I headed out to find another cave. The new cave I found, just like the freshman class, had potential. And it wouldn't disappoint, because right before I hit deep slate, I got tons of iron and tons of lapis, and then headed further in. And that's also like the freshman class. Anyway, I saw this structure underground and decided to mine over to it. What's this? Wait, I actually want to see what that is. And once I got there, I was kind of reminded of the stronghold tunnels. Once I got to the middle, the chests were pretty insignificant, but there was a gold block in the middle of them. One of the tunnels randomly led downward and into another cave, so I explored a little bit and found some more diamonds. And my habit of breaking urns actually paid off when I got 56 emeralds from one. 56 emeralds? But all this skulk was giving me my winter soldier moment, so I headed back to the presumably safe place. And once I mined in there, I actually mined into the library, but it was kind of insignificant, with the only chest giving me Curse of Binding and Luck of a C2. But the next room actually did give me a little bit of payout. Sharpness 1. Couple more. Then I saw a trapdoor and obviously jumped down it. Is this like a trap? Okay. And then I just continued to mine random directions and just kept finding more and more rooms. But I never got any loot from them. So I ended up running back down all the halls and didn't find anything. And then after checking my map, I found another one of those bone structures underground. And I decided I wanted to go. So that's exactly what I did. And eventually after some mining, I fell into it. While exploring, I found a bunch of gold blocks scattered everywhere and a few chests with a bunch of god apples and diamonds. And then I destroyed the spawners of the worst mob in the game. After looting the first floor, I headed up to the second one and destroyed all the stray spawners. But then I went back to the first floor and destroyed more spawners. Somewhere on the second floor, I actually ended up finding a diamond block, but it was rigged with a trap. What the? That was pretty much everything, so I continued exploring the caves. Eventually I found this super open area and I actually found a few diamonds in it. While exploring, I found this weird skeleton dungeon, so I kept exploring that. Some of the chests actually had some pretty good loot, like god apples and just regular golden apples, so that was pretty cool. But the rest of the chests were pretty insignificant. So after killing about 1,000 zombies and 1,000 creepers, I headed out. Once I got kind of bored of mining, I decided to just mine up to get out the cave because I had no clue where I was. Funny enough, I got out of the cave right when day 133 started. So that's the first thing I did on day 133 was head back to my base. But the birch village was a lot closer, so I decided to head there first instead to teleport back, and I accidentally started a raid. Oh, I did not mean to start a raid. Wait. So I decided just to stay and fight it because this was the village that had all of my trades. First time, I'm convinced my villagers wanted to live because half of them were in the well and I could just block them off easily. The first wave, I didn't even end up fighting a single pillager because I was spending the entire time trying to get another trapdoor to block off my mending villager. So I'm never gonna dance again. The way I did. The second wave I did decide to help though, and it was extremely easy with my dragon armor and netherite diamond sword. This village with the amount of iron golems and like warriors actually was really easy. I didn't even do half of the raid. The third wave did take a little while just because there were a few ravengers. And just as it was turning night, I actually did finish the raid. But then I went back to my base and went to sleep. On day 134, I lined up like the 5 shulkers I had full of loot from my mining trip and started to empty them out. So I put all the iron and gold in the furnaces, and yeah, that was literally the entire day. Besides, when I used a netherite ingot to make my charm unbreakable, so when I die, it can't break. On day 135, I wanted to fight the Void Shadow again because I realized I still haven't gotten the rewards from its quests. So I headed over to the end portal, jumped in, and then ender pearled up to the platform. And then entered the Void Realm. Not even a minute into the fight, this happened. Yeah, I literally sat on this menu for like 20 minutes and just left. But eventually, I did just run back with a bunch of blocks to see if my grave had been on the platform. Once I got there, it wasn't there. I just lost everything. And eventually, I did just die and accept it. All of it had protection 4 except for the chest plate, so it was pretty decent. And then I grabbed a stack of diamonds to duplicate my netherite upgrade. And I upgraded everything to netherite except for my chest plate because I wanted to combine it with another chest plate. I also turned my 3 pieces of netherite into dragon armor. I also grabbed a spare bow and my old dragon sword, alongside grabbing my dragon pickaxe and my spare fortune pickaxe. And then I went to sleep. Day 136 started with me collecting all my potato crops with my fortune pickaxe. Afterward, I replanted them and then went back in my base to cook them. I wanted full netherite diamond tools again as soon as possible, so I hid into the nether because I was completely out of netherite. Eventually, while I was exploring, my pickaxe just disappeared. And I had to stop recording to see what happened because I had no clue. Eventually though, I did realize it just disappeared and I just had to try to use it. But I did eventually continue exploring into day 137. While exploring, I found this weird structure and went inside of it. I found a chest and opened it and I just blew up. What the? The loot wasn't even that good. Eventually I did find like some weird nether fortress tunnels and that was pretty cool, but there was nothing in it. And then after a little bit more exploring, I found a piglin pillager outpost and it had a few gold blocks and a little bit of netherite scrap, so that was alright. The next thing I found was this nether ancient city, so that was actually really cool to see. But I was almost out of food and getting bored of the nether, so I tried going into the nether portal, but the gas made that a little hard. Wait, I didn't even think about that. Afterward though, I got one to light it and then it ran into the portal, so I killed it. Back in the overworld, I spawned in a cave, and I mined up to get out, and I was pretty far. So I started running back. Halfway through day 138, I actually made it to a village. Back at my base, I decided I wanted to fight the Void Shadow again, mostly because I wanted to boost an enchanted books he drops. So I found myself in the end heading to the portal. Once I was in there, the fight was extremely long and tedious, and I didn't even take really any damage at all. It was pretty easy. Eventually though, I did kill him, and I actually got a Protection 5 book, and the quest still wasn't completed. Then back in the overworld, I just headed back to my base. Back at my base, I turned my spare Power 5 Infinity Bow into a Dragon Bow, and then I crafted more end crystals in preparation for the dragon fight again. This was mostly because I wanted more dragon scales, and I thought it would give me a lot of XP. So I headed into the end and respawned the dragon. I seriously don't like showing this stuff because it's really boring, and if you're watching this, you've probably fought the dragon. So yeah, that took up the rest of day 139. On day 140, I decided to take advantage of the fact that I had the fame effect again. So I found myself at the birch village releasing all my waterboarded prisoners and collecting all the sticks from my chests. And then I began trading. I went up to my mending villager to buy a mending book, but I didn't have a book, and then he threw one at me. Whoa, he just gave me what I wanted. Wait, what the? I continued trading throughout day 141 until I went back to my base to enchant a new chestplate. I eventually did get a protection 4 and breaking 3 chestplate, so I started to use that one instead of my old one. And then I just went back to trading for the rest of day 141. Day 142, I headed into the nether because I once again needed more netherite. I didn't find any last time. And then I found a bastion and I got a single ancient debris, so I guess that's a step in the right direction. And then I found another gauntlet stadium, so obviously I had to fight. Eventually I did kill it and I got a few ancient debris from it, so that was pretty good actually. I also got another blazing eye. Eventually I found this weird like flooded lava city, and I didn't really explore it too long because it had no loot in it. But I did think it was really cool and notable enough to point out. I also came across this giant dome structure and decided to go up to it because it looked awesome. Once I was up to it, I ran inside and found the wildfire. At first he wasn't taking damage and I was confused, but then I realized I had to break all of his shields to actually damage him. Regardless, he kind of looked like a pencil, so obviously I had to kill him. The next place I found myself was at Wither Skeleton Dungeon, so that was actually kind of cool, and I did actually enjoy exploring it. Eventually though, I found some obsidian and collected tent so I can make a portal back to the overworld whenever I wanted to go back. Once I was done looting it though, I headed out. The next place I found myself was an even cooler one of those dome structures, and I headed inside of it and there was another wildfire. After killing this one, I had enough fragments to craft a wildfire crown. Not long after, I found myself fighting another nether gauntlet because I needed the netherite from it. Once he was dead, I grabbed the blazing eye and the netherite. Right after leaving, I found this weird portal structure, and I thought there would be loot inside of it, so I mined into the middle of it. But there was none, so I headed back into the overworld. Once again, I found myself in a cave, so I mined upward. I saw it was a few blocks away from my base, and began to head over. On day 144, I found a really cool, like, autumn biome with a ruined village inside of it. I didn't really find anything else until a little later into day 144, where I found an acacia village and teleported back to my base. Day 145, I put a Soul Speed 3 book on my boots, and I can't find the clip of it, but I also put the Protection 5 book on my chest plate. And then after dropping off all my loot, I crafted the Wildfire Crown. Now I'm pretty surprised I haven't fought it yet, but I wanted to fight the Wither now, so I have my 4 Soul Sand and 3 Wither Skulls and headed into the end. In the end, I spawned the Wither and began the fight. It was definitely harder than some of the other bosses, but at the end of the day, it was still easy. I'm used to the Bedrock Wither anyway, so this was pretty much nothing. Anyway, with my Wither Star in hand, I headed back to my base and put it in my chest with my second Wither star, which I didn't even know I fought the wither the first time, but anyway, I ended up just deciding to craft a beacon with it. I also crafted all my netherite scrap into 2 more netherite ingots. One of them was used to upgrade my diamond chest plate, and then I made it dragon as well. I also crafted a bunch of my iron into blocks, alongside my gold. I then grabbed 2 stacks of emerald blocks and started to build my beacon. On the second layer though, I realized this wasn't going to be quite enough, but I got halfway through the 3rd layer before I went back to grab some iron blocks, but I ended up going to sleep before finishing the beacon. Day 146, I finished the beacon and then headed to the end where this would happen. No! Thankfully, I had a void totem on though. Even though when it respawned me, it sent me back off into the void again where I would put another void totem on. What the heck? After that incident, I actually made it into the end. Not sure why I was here, I think I was just bored, but I did get back before the end of day 46. On day 147, I went back to spawn the eye because my old platform had been corrupted by one of the dragon fights. Once the platform had spawned, I had entered it to fight the void shadow again. This had been my longest, taking almost 45 minutes to complete because the right crystals just weren't spawning. Once it was done though, I got a bunch of golden apples but no enchanted books. So I headed back to my base and put all the loot away before going to sleep. On day 149, I used one of my nether stars to craft a pocket waystone so I could teleport to any of my waystones from anywhere. And then I went out in the morning and collected all my fully grown potatoes. A little bit later, I decided to use one of my blazing eyes and an obsidian heart to craft a blast amplifier. And when I placed it down, it looked nothing like what I expected because I thought it was a banner. Is it like a banner? Oh. No, I never thought I'd say this, but I kind of wanted to go fish, so I crafted a sleeping bag and got on my dragon to go find a spot. Eventually, I found an ocean as it turned night and went to sleep. And then on day 50, I started fishing. I had live catch on my fishing rod, so it was a little bit cooler than regular fishing because I was pulling up actual fish, but it wasn't really anything special. I literally got bored after 2 or 3 minutes and tried flying away, but got stuck in an unrendered chunk. Once I reloaded my game, I found some underwater destroyed ocean monument, but I didn't have aqua affinity, so I couldn't really loot it. The rest of the day was just flying until eventually I found one of the soccer villages, and I'd never seen one before, and this has to be my favorite village by far. So I just spent a little while running around it as it began to turn night. I have to go to the bathroom. Holy. Eventually, when I got back, I ended up going to sleep on a sleeping bag and then started on my way home. I also found this cool looking pillager outpost and decided to land on top of it and fight. And this might have been a mistake because once I headed inside of it, a raid started because I killed a leader and I guess there's villagers in here. And this place was crowded once the raid started. And the loot was nothing special at all. So I took my dragon and headed out to find a birch tower in the ocean that looked pretty cool. Inside of it, it had nothing but a little bit of paper and a few fireworks, but I still actually kind of liked it. The next thing I ran into was this sandcastle and it had a couple TNT that I decided to take along with some emeralds. And then I found a pirate ship loaded with skeletons. Sea of Thieves video probably coming soon, by the way. And I started to kill them all because they were all paralyzed from the waist down. It's always been a dream of mine to kill a bunch of paraplegic people. Anyways, I kept killing them and there were a lot of them, so this took a long time. And then I headed into the lower deck and got a single diamond. I also headed into the room where the spawner was and got into a little bit of a predicament. After all of my paraplegic victims were dead, I went to sleep on top of their ship to show them who's boss. On day 152, back to flying to my base. I'm not sure what events led to this, I just unpaused my recording and saw an isolager castle, but I guess it would be worth it because there's a diamond block in the middle. I was pretty surprised once I got inside to see that there were 2 bosses. Why are there 2? Things got intense pretty quickly once I decided to go down the stairs, because I was getting sandwiched by 2 big wrong script. I was getting sandwiched by 2 isolagers and a bunch of their minions, and I had mining fatigue and weakness, so I couldn't kill anything. And then the chillagers decided to join, which just makes things so much more fun because I started to actually die. After a few more minutes of feeling like a high school girl on Halloween, I ended up actually mining through a few blocks and escaping. I escaped into this building where I smelted up some iron so I could actually warm up. And then once I was warm, I was ready. That was kind of weird. Before I went to assert dominance over another man though, I put down a sleeping bag and went to sleep. And then I woke up on day 153 to this beautiful sunrise preparing me to jump this man in the castle. And the plan was to open a hole in the wall and then back up as they came in, and I could warm myself up using my torches. Once a lot of them were dead, I started to use my bow to kill off the isolagers mostly. Once one was dead, I ran in and finished off the other one. After fighting my way to the top, I finally collected my diamond block. And then I took my dragon and started to fly back again. And eventually I found this weird pillager castle, so I went to explore it. These pillagers were really messed up in the head. Oh my gosh, wait, I want to do this. Goodbye. Oh. And right once I entered the actual building, I got swarmed. I need to eat. Anyway, I started looking at all the books on the bookshelf, and this would prove to be a huge waste of time every time I did this. And then I found myself mining into a chicken's skull. Looked at more books, and then jumped down into their dungeon. But sadly, the dungeon wasn't as freaky as I thought, but I made sure to have some fun before leaving. On day 154, I gathered up all the hay bales and headed out. I'm lying, I didn't head out. I actually went back upstairs and started looting again. Eventually though, I did find the freak zone and it had a diamond block under it. And then I went to sleep on top of the tower. Day 155 and I was on the dragon heading back to my base again. When I was almost back at my base, I accidentally started a raid at the plains village nearby. And then I finally got back and landed my dragon. Afterwards, I spent a little while emptying out my inventory and then I teleported to a far off village in search for an ancient city. And started my way down into the cave. On day 156, I jumped down into the cave and landed on a stalactite and almost died. After my almost near-death experience, I went over and mined a bunch of golden ore nearby. And that seemed to be pretty much all I was finding for a while was gold ore. Eventually, I did find some redstone and diamonds, a little bit of iron, and then another one vein of diamonds, soon after finding another skeleton dungeon. But it, once again, didn't really have any good loot, and I found a diamond vein bigger than one, and then just after found another one, but it was one, and another. Once I found a big cave, I actually found a bunch of stone diamond ore, and that was pretty neat. Eventually, I did just decide to go home, though, and spent the first half of day 157 just putting all my loot away. The second half of the day, I started to enchant a new diamond sword. Hey! And then I combined this one with my other best diamond sword, and crafted one of every netherite ingot, and turned the diamond sword into a netherite diamond. And as the day came to an end, I crafted a fair bit more bread because I started to run out of food again. Day 158, I found myself looking for a new cave to explore near the bone village. The first one I ran across didn't end up leading anywhere, but eventually I did find one that seemed to go deep. But after going a little further down, I noticed a bunch of skulk. But I collected my diamonds anyway. I actually did find a good bit of diamonds in this cave to start off with. But I saw one of those bone structures on my map and began to head over to it, which did take a little while. Eventually, I did get there though. This is also when I decided to start taking every bit of loot I could find pretty much because I had a bunch of shulker boxes and an ender chest. I'm just gonna start taking everything. Every bit of loot. Anyway, I continued walking around looting, and eventually I got another god apple, so that was neat. And I found this one chest with a bunch of diamonds in it. I also found another diamond block trap, but completely forgot about the TNT. And besides a few more diamonds, that's pretty much all that happened notable here. And then I found some giant underground structure and had to head over. Diamonds. After a really long time though, I actually did mine into it. Yo, what? I'm not sure, but I'm assuming it's some wither skeleton fortress because there's tons of wither skeletons everywhere in soul sand. And then I found the skulk area and this happened. Is a shrieker. But then I started running around destroying as many skulk sensors as I could find. And eventually I had this to say. The warden's actually gonna kill me. Like, I'm being so dead ass. But I proceeded further anyway and looted it and really got nothing that good. But as soon as I even thought the warden had spawned, I did. I heard it scream. But I checked my map and saw that the warden did spawn. And while trying to clear out the area of wither skeletons, a second warden spawned. A second one. I spent a really long time looking around trying to find the wardens. And eventually I did find one, and I figured if I could break these iron bars, then I could actually kill him from a distance. So I broke them and then saw he went another room back. And then I broke those bars as well and ran. And since he was now trapped and distracted, I could just kill him from afar. Holy jump scare. Once he was dead, I ran in and collected my loot. There was still one more warden alive, and to make sure it was the last one, I went around and destroyed a few of the shriekers I could find. Eventually, I decided I would kill the last warden by digging a tunnel and trapping him at the end of it. And then I mined the building where I thought he was, and found out he wasn't there and he was actually above me. Oh, he's above. I tried building up to get his attention, but I got his attention a little too well, and he actually ended up attacking me. Oh my gosh. This also made me realize my tunnel needed to be further, so I dug it further. And then I noticed a spot I could actually shoot through to damage him, and I did that for a little while until he moved. Eventually, I also found a diamond mending hoe, and I was actually hoping for one of those the entire time I was down here. And while I was walking to my tunnel, the warden actually decided he wanted to come join me. From this point, it was a pretty easy kill. Now that that was all dealt with, I kind of just ran around with the mending hoe destroying some skulk for a little while for the XP. But eventually I went to loot this room and another warden spawned. Since I'm not a pussy though and wasn't sure if the warden had spawned, I decided to keep mining skulk nearby. I really didn't want to deal with this warden, so I just ran away and mined a ton of skulk for XP. Eventually I headed over to a bone dungeon and realized I had already been there. And then I went and headed over to another one, and it was the one I found on the first episode. I didn't notice, so I explored it for a while, but eventually I left and dug over to an ancient city I found a while away. Eventually though, I made it to the actual ancient city and ender pearled over here. Even though I knew I was going to set off the streaker, I didn't think I would spawn a warden. Of course. But now I was in a bit of a weird situation with a warden on the other half of this portal and me not having feather falling. So I walked over to see if the warden was still there, and he definitely was. So I ended up just ender pearling down onto some wool. I also realized I could break, place, and run on wool and it wouldn't make a sound. So I broke down and then destroyed the 2 skulk shriekers right next to me. There were 2 more shriekers that were surrounded by a ton of skulk sensors, so I mined up some wool and started to cover them. Once they were all covered, I destroyed the skulk sensors nearby. And then I saw the warden and thought he wouldn't jump down on him, so I started shooting him. And even after going a while away, he still shot me. I tried using the tunnel method, but this wasn't working, so I just mined away. And eventually I found a cave and just kind of ran around the cave for a little while until heading back. Once I got back, I decided I would destroy every shrieker in this entire area. But another warden spawned before I could even do that, so I dipped. Once that warden despawned, I ran up to the shrieker and destroyed it. And then I started to run around and destroy every skulk sensor and shrieker I could find. But there were a lot of problems I came across. But before that, I found out these ancient bases were actually pretty good sometimes, and there were tons of them. And I tried surrounding this shrieker, but one side of it wasn't covered, I guess, and it went off. After that warden despawned, I broke a vase and got attacked by a leech. In the next vase, I got attacked by a stalker. And then I saw these 3 shriekers right next to each other, and it was pretty unlucky, but I managed to deal with it. And then right before I could open the chest, I break this skulk sensor and set off this shrieker. And then I just watched the warden until it despawned. Once he did despawn, I decided to actually collect a bunch of wool now. And then I just ran around for a little while destroying ancient bases. And I just kept doing this and destroying shriekers over and over again, and this lasted a long time. Damn it, are you kidding me? Eventually I broke down to the rooms beneath the portal, and it was actually pretty cool. It showed how transparent blocks couldn't conduct redstone, and it showed how comparators work and how far redstone goes and target blocks. And then it was just back to destroying shriekers for another while. And then I found some diamond ore in the skull. I just destroyed it. And then I found a trap of note blocks and pressure plates. And this was a long time. Eventually though, I decided to take the heart of the deep and light the portal. And after mentally preparing myself, I head into the other side. I was kind of scared of these midi warden guys, so I just shot them from afar for a while. But eventually I just decided to run in and start fighting them. Once I built up the courage, I decided to just run through the forest to explore. The first things I saw were phantoms and skulk centipedes. I don't think I like this place. On top of all that, a warden spawned too. So I just went back to the overworld and then teleported back to my base once I was in the overworld. And I laid down all of my shulker boxes prepared to empty them into my storage, but went to sleep before I did it. I spent the entirety of day 168 emptying all my stuff into my storage. I started off day 169 by crafting a bunch of bread because once again I was low on food. And then I headed over to the ancient city because I wanted to collect a bunch of wool and get some XP. And that's exactly what I did. Once I had enough levels in wool, I headed back to my base toward the end of day 170. The rest of day 170, I just put everything away and crafted a bunch of blocks of lapis and redstone. On day 171, I grabbed a bunch of that wool I got previously and crafted quite a few beds to head into the nether and start trying to collect netherite. And then I headed into the nether and started to mine. Day 174, and I crafted all my netherite into ingots. And then I crafted one of every netherite ingot because I wanted to make netherite diamond pickaxes. So I turned my netherite fortune pickaxe into netherite diamond. And then I made one more of every netherite ingot because I needed to do this with my silk touch pickaxe now. Before though, I went to enchant another pickaxe and got a perfect fortune 3 pickaxe to combine with it. So I just combined them to get rid of the fortune, and now I have a perfect silk touch pickaxe. And then I took that and made it netherite before making it netherite iron, and so on. And right before the day ended, I turned a bunch of my emeralds into emerald blocks. On the morning of day 175, I took a bunch of the iron blocks off my beacon and replaced them with emeralds. And then headed into the end so I could fight the Void Shadow again. Very fun fight. Day 176, and I teleported to the birch village so I could trade a bunch of sticks. Eventually though, I was back in my base and I wanted to build some type of museum, but I wasn't sure how I wanted to build it and display the items yet, so I spent a while trying to figure it out. Eventually though, I realized the infusion pedestal allows me to place items on it and that they float and rotate. And I thought this was literally perfect, so I went and crafted a quartz pedestal. And this was actually perfect. This is what I would use. Day 177, I thought I wanted to build the museum out of quartz, so I grabbed a ton of quartz in the nether. Day 178, I finally got back and realized I didn't want to use quartz, but I already had it all, so. And then I decided I wanted to build the museum underground, and I wanted a block to drop out from underneath me. So I grabbed a piston, but I haven't done redstone in years, to be clear, and I used to do bedrock redstone, so this would be bad. You can kind of tell it was going to be bad because I started with this, not realizing that the block would push up and be above the floor. Eventually though, I finally realized this and I built it a block lower. No, I kind of knew what needed to happen, but I didn't know how I wanted to do it, and I didn't want to look up a tutorial. Okay. I spent a long time using an observer thinking I was close, and I guess I kinda was. Okay. Eventually though, I realized I needed a repeater, and I started to have problems with the redstone signal going over the observer. Yeah, it's day 179, and I'm still working on this. Eventually though, I thought I had it working, but when I went to press the button, no, it doesn't. But then I realized I just forgot to tick the repeater a couple times. Oh, that was actually really easy that I overcomplicated like crazy. The next thing I did was mine straight down, but my pickaxe was too fast for me falling, so I kept taking a ton of damage. Eventually I got to the depth I wanted and started to dig out a little bit of a tunnel. But this was taking a long time. So I went back up to the surface and mined my beacon to see if it would allow me to insta-mine deep slate. And while I mined a hole trying to find my other one so I could have a place for the beacon, I fell on a stalactite. Eventually I found the right spot and dug out an area for the beacon. But after I built the first layer of the beacon, I realized I built it wrong. Eventually though, I did have the area built correctly and I had the beacon down. Once it was down with haste 2, I could mine deep slate, which was so nice. And then I proceeded to just mine out a decent sized area. And now I have a tunnel and I have no clue what I want to do with it. Eventually I just decided to build out these little rooms for the pedestals. But I went up to grab them and went to sleep. On day 181 I decided I wanted to decorate with stone bricks, so I grabbed a bunch of stone. Back in my base, I crafted all the stone into stone bricks. And then I went to enchant a new axe because I also wanted to use spruce logs. So after my base, I combined my efficiency 4 and unbreaking 3 pickaxe and headed to the spruce village. At the spruce village, I collected a bunch of spruce wood. But after a little while, I was back in my base and ready to decorate. Once I was down there decorating, I put the first few pedestals in, and then it started to all come together when I put the stone bricks. So I just went around and put a bunch of stone bricks all over the floors, and then put a bunch on the ceilings, and then I decided to put the spruce trim, and then I filled in all the walls. And then the place actually kind of started to come together, but it didn't look that good until I put the roof in. Now that I have the roof, I decided I wanted to put the floor in, so I mined out an area and filled it with spruce planks. After this, I decided to raise the roof 1 block and put slabs in glowstone. As the sun began to rise on day 183, I went back down into my museum and filled it with quartz pedestals. I changed my mind about only showing items and decided to craft a bunch of armor stands so I could show off my armor too. Show off to myself, that is. I don't have any friends. The first armor set I crafted to show off was Cincinnati armor, and then I crafted a full set of ruby armor as well. But I turned the ruby armor into fire ruby because it's a lot cooler and more rare. Next thing you know, I found myself putting all my armor sets down, and then I looked at what it would cost to make crystallite armor. But before making all that, I made a full set of netherite to put down there. I put the diamond and netherite next to each other, but I eventually did remove the diamond. And I did get a bunch more terminite ingots smelting up because I needed to make a terminite anvil to make terminite armor to turn into crystallite armor. And then I spent way too long trying to find out how to crush the ender pearls into ender dust, not realizing I needed a netherite hammer. Once I found out though, I just crafted a netherite hammer and then went and started destroying them. And then I went into the end and started killing endermen because I needed more ender pearls to turn into ender dust so I could make more terminite. Now I had a bunch of terminite smelting up, but it takes a long time to smelt. So now it's just a matter of time. And eventually I did have enough to craft a terminite anvil. And after wasting the rest of the day, I went to sleep. On day 185, I would decide I was bored and head into the nether to explore. The first thing I found was this piglin manor, and inside of it there was a netherite bell that I couldn't mine, and it kind of annoyed me. After that, I found some pretty lame stuff, like bastions that had no loot or anything. Eventually, though, I did come across another one of those Cincinnati cities, and I really wanted to go visit it. And once I was inside, I just kind of looked around and walked for a little, because it was pretty cool. But eventually, I got to the loot room. And while the first floor loot wasn't anything crazy, the second floor had 2 netherite blocks again. And then I found another one of those loot buildings. And alongside of it, 2 more netherite blocks and a bunch of ancient debris and netherite scrap. And then I just fought another nether gauntlet, raided a few bastion loot rooms, fought another nether gauntlet, and then headed back to my base, finally. After heading back to my base, I just put everything away for the rest of the night. Day 188, I crafted another netherite set of armor because I would need it to craft the dragon armor. And then I went back to fight the void shadow again, and spent the rest of the day glazing my perfect sword. I started off day 189 by fighting the wither again. Back in my base, I couldn't find my netherite hammer, so me being as rich as I am, I just crafted another. Now that I have my netherite hammer, I could craft all the forged terminite plates I would need to craft the terminite armor. And then I just crafted all the armor. And I had everything to turn into crystallite, but I wasn't sure how to do it. But then I realized I had to surround the infusion pedestal and purple pedestals. After doing that, I started to turn my armor into crystallite. Once the full set was completed, I put it down in my museum, and then I grabbed a bunch of glass panes to start covering stuff up. I didn't cover all of it fully because I still needed to put the glowstone in. So that's where I found myself next, scavenging the nether roof for glowstone. And once I decided I had enough, I headed back to my base and went to sleep. On day 190, I started to fill in all the glowstone in the museum. Once I had the glowstone in, I could finally fill in the glass panes I needed to fully cover some of the armor stands. And then I went back up to my base on the surface to grab a bunch of items to put in the museum. And I ended up putting things like the prime eye, blazing eye, dragon egg, and dragon scale. And then enclosed them all with glass panes. I did have more stuff I wanted to put in here, so I dug out a couple spaces for a few more rooms. Day 191 is corrupt, but day 192, I found myself in the nether looking for wither skulls. Yeah, that was the whole day. I just ran around the nether fortress killing wither skeletons. I'm not showing that. Ironic I'm not showing that, because on day 193, I came across a wither skeleton spawner in the nether, and then built a perimeter around it, and started to just kill a bunch of wither skeletons. But then my brother told me to come outside for a second, and it ended up taking all the way from day 193 till day 197. But on day 197, I did end up going back to my base. And this wouldn't last long because I needed Skulk to craft Warden armor. Anyways, I'm now back at my base again, duplicating the Warden smithing upgrade, and then crafting the 4 reinforced echo shards I needed before turning a set of netherite into Warden armor. And then I put the Warden armor in the museum where it belongs. I spent a good majority of day 98 just exploring without finding anything until eventually I came across a Cincinnati city. And this place had 2 more netherite blocks for me. And after finding those, I decided I needed dragon armor in the museum. So I went to fight the dragon again. Once done with the fight, I jumped into the portal for about the 100th time. It then turned a set of netherite into dragon, which I would place inside the museum. On day 200, I built the last 2 rooms for the museum, in which I would place the blast amplifier and the table of levitation. And I placed in the glowstone, and they were complete. So I filled up the decorations from the hall. And as day 200 came to an end, I had a quick run through of my museum, and then went upstairs to go to sleep.